A question I asked yesterday, I ask you too. Tell us what you know about Fayette County's achievement gap and what experience you have in closing the achievement gap.
Fayette County is not alone in that closing the achievement gap is a challenge, and it's going to be an issue. From every group that I've talked with today, that has come up, so I know that it is a priority. And with that being said, I think that we have seen enough varied academic performances among schools to understand that we can close achievement gaps. We have schools right here in this community that has closed gaps. We know of schools across this state that has closed gaps. So we know that it can be done. The other thing that we have to understand as we're looking at this achievement gap is that poverty and race are not destiny, and we have to embrace the idea that we have a moral obligation to ensure that we're providing an equitable education for all of our students. Now, there's no silver bullet when we talk about closing the achievement gap. We're going to have some very intentional, and we're going to have some very focused strategies that we're going to use to eliminate, I like to say, rather than close the achievement gap. We have to talk about each and every student. We have to look at the needs of each and every student. We're going to have time that we can look at the progress of these particular students, and if they have not yet gotten there, then we have to talk about those interventions that we can put in place. And oftentimes we think those interventions may be personnel, it may be more money. Sometimes we just have to look at what we're doing, and if it's not working, then we need to stop doing it. We may look at direct instruction. We may look at structuring the day different for these particular kids that are not yet there. We need to look at extending the learning time. So I think there are many things that we're going to have to do, but the first thing is we're going to have to know each and every child that have not met those content standards. And when we know who they are, it may behoove us to think about, do we need to reteach these particular standards to these children? And that's one of the things that we have done, is that we reteach until the students have mastered the standard. When we think about that idea, is that not what really education is about? Is that we ensure that the students master the content. It's going to take some kids more time. It's going to take students being taught in a different way. But if that's a priority, then we've got to find a way to make sure that we do that.
Enough money to do that?
And it's not all about money. Sometimes we just have to restructure how we do things. And I tell my staff that all the time. Doing the right things for kids doesn't all the time take money.
Tell us your experience in closing or narrowing the achievement gap.
We know that the achievement gap is a national issue as well as a state issue. And I have addressed this question most of the day, and one of the things that I have said to our constituency is that we know that there are varied academic performances among students in schools across this county. We know also that there are schools in this district that have closed achievement gaps. So the key is that we know that it can be done. And we know that we can close gaps with students in poverty. We know that we can close gaps with students with disabilities. We know we can close gaps with students of different races. So I would like to say that we cannot allow race and poverty, they are not, actually, race and poverty are not destiny. So we have to embrace the fact that it can happen, and then we have to have a belief system that we can do something different. So what we have done is we have looked at individual students across our district. We have what we call monthly progress monitoring meetings, and we assess whether or not these particular student groups have met the standards that have been taught. If those standards have not been mastered by those individual student groups, then, and our principals actually came up with this, then they implement reteaching those particular standards. So the question is to us, is that not what teaching is all about? We teach so the students can master the standard. If they have not met it yet, then we have to provide an opportunity for them to meet it. So we reteach the content. We provide extended learning time. We have to, sometimes we use direct teaching, we use interventions, and then we monitor whether or not those interventions have been implemented with fidelity. And then we reevaluate the students to see if they're there yet. And if they are not, then we continue to do some things differently. If they are, then we have done what we were set out to do. So you have to look at individual students, and we have to put a name with a face. It's not just numbers of students that are not there yet. And we do flexible grouping. We talk about what can we do as a team. And the last question I ask at the monitoring meetings to my principals is, what can I do or what can we do to support you in ensuring that the kids are meeting the standards? So I think you have to have very specific strategies to close the achievement gap.
What do you see as the biggest challenge facing FCPS, and how would you address that challenge?
I think it has been resounding today that the biggest challenge facing us is eliminating our achievement gaps. From every group that I've met with today, it has been their number one priority. We want to continue to keep that conversation going. We want to continue to ensure that that is the priority of this school district. And so we will be working on that. It's going to be a challenge, but as I said earlier, it can be done. So that's where we will spend our time, our energy, and we will have to provide the resources to make that happen.